When Maya suggested we try living off the grid for a year, I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. "You're serious?" I asked, wiping my mouth as she stared at me with the steady determination she reserved for topics like climate change or why Crocs should never be worn in public. "As a heart attack," she said, leaning forward on the couch. "Think about it. No rent, no utilities, no constant hum of capitalism in the background. Just us, a cabin in the woods, and nature." Maya had a way of pitching ideas that made them sound reasonable. Like the time she convinced me to try hot yoga despite my complete lack of flexibility. Or the time she decided we should foster a puppy that ended up chewing through 2 pairs of my sneakers. But this? Moving into a solar-powered cabin with a composting toilet and no Wi-Fi? It was the kind of thing that sounded romantic in theory, but would inevitably devolve into us screaming at each other over who forgot to chop the firewood. Still, I couldn't say no to her. I never could. So, 6 weeks later, we were packing up our lives into a U-Haul and heading for a remote corner of Vermont. The cabin was exactly what you'd imagine. Rustic, cozy, and so far off the beaten path that even Google Maps gave up halfway there. It had no running water, a wood stove for heat, and a solar panel that looked like it had been installed during the Reagan administration. Maya was ecstatic. I was quietly panicking. From the start, our approaches to this grand experiment couldn't have been more different. Maya threw herself into it with the enthusiasm of a reality show contestant, chopping wood, learning to can vegetables, and building a chicken coop out of salvaged wood. She even gave the chickens names: Agatha, Henrietta, and Beyoncé. I, on the other hand, struggled to adapt. My idea of a productive day involved checking off tasks from a to-do list, but out here, the tasks never ended. If I wasn't hauling water from the well, I was trying to start a fire with damp logs or chasing Beyoncé out of the garden. Our first big fight happened over the composting toilet. Maya had been in charge of setting it up, and I assumed she'd read the instructions. Turns out, she'd skimmed them. I found this out the hard way when the thing overflowed while I was trying to add sawdust. "This is disgusting," I yelled, stepping back as Maya stood there holding a bucket and laughing. "You're not helping," I snapped, but she just shook her head. "You're the one who overfilled it," she said, as if I'd single-handedly ruined the sanctity of the composting process. Things only got worse as winter set in. The solar panel couldn't keep up with the shorter days, so we were constantly rationing power. The wood stove smoked up the cabin if you didn't position the logs just right, and Maya's brilliant idea to make candles from beeswax ended with her covered in sticky goo and me cleaning wax off the counters. "We need a system," I said one evening as we sat in the flickering candlelight. "We can't keep flying by the seat of our pants." Maya groaned, leaning back in her chair. "Why do you always need a system? This is supposed to be about simplicity, about living in the moment." "Simplicity doesn't mean chaos," I shot back. "If we don't organize, we're going to freeze to death or run out of food." "We're not going to freeze to death," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're being dramatic." That was the thing about Maya. She thrived in chaos. To her, every problem was a challenge, every setback an adventure. To me, they were proof that we'd made a huge mistake. But then there were moments, small, fleeting moments, that made it all worth it. Like the night we sat outside under a sky full of stars, wrapped in blankets and sipping tea, the air so crisp it felt like you could break it in half. Or the morning we discovered Henrietta had laid her first egg, and Maya squealed like a kid on Christmas. For all her lack of planning, she had a way of finding joy in the little things, and sometimes I envied her for it. Still, the tension between us simmered just below the surface. I hated how she left things to chance, how she'd brush off my suggestions as if I was the one being unreasonable. She hated how I micromanaged everything, how I couldn't just let go and trust that things would work out. It all came to a head during the storm. We'd seen it coming for days, a massive snowstorm that was supposed to dump 2 feet of snow on us. I spent the morning stacking firewood, double-checking our food supplies, and making sure we had enough candles and batteries. Maya, meanwhile, decided it was the perfect time to bake bread from scratch. "We need to be prepared," I snapped as she stood there kneading dough like we weren't about to be buried in a blizzard. "I am prepared," she said, without looking up. "We've got wood, we've got food, and we've got each other. What else do we need?" Maybe a plan? I said, throwing my hands up. You always do this, Maya. You just wing it, like nothing bad could ever happen. And you act like the world's going to end if we're not perfectly organized, she shot back. Why can't you just trust me for once? Because your version of trust is reckless, I said. You think everything will magically work out, but it doesn't. It never does. The storm hit that night, and it was worse than either of us expected. The wind howled like a freight train, and the snow piled up so fast it blocked the door by morning. The power from the solar panel ran out halfway through the night, and the firewood I'd stacked wasn't enough to keep the cabin warm. I sat there in the dark, shivering and fuming, while Maya wrapped herself in a blanket and stared out the window. Guess you were right, she said finally, her breath visible in the cold air. I didn't say anything. I was too tired to argue. By the time the storm cleared, we were both at our breaking point. But something shifted as we dug out the cabin and checked on the chickens. Maya let me take the lead for once, following my directions without complaint. And I tried, really tried, not to lecture her when we found out she'd forgotten to secure the coop door and Beyoncé had wandered into the snowdrift. In the end, we got through it. Just barely. And as we sat by the wood stove that evening, eating the bread Maya had baked before the storm, I realized something. Maybe her way wasn't so bad after all. Maybe I needed her chaos as much as she needed my structure. Still, I can't help wondering, AITA for wishing she'd take things more seriously? Or is she for refusing to admit that sometimes plans really do save the day? It started with a dog. Well, not a dog exactly, more like the idea of one. My best friend Kaylee has always wanted a German Shepherd, ever since we were kids. Every year for her birthday, she'd make a wish and blow out her candles, and every year, no dog. Now, at 29, she was living alone in a 2-bedroom townhouse with a fenced yard, the perfect setup for her dream pet. Except, instead of a shepherd, she had a cat named Pumpkin who despised her and a Roomba that was afraid of him. Next year, she said every time I brought it up, when work isn't so crazy. Last month, though, she called me, voice trembling like she'd just hit the jackpot. You won't believe this, she said, her words tripping over each other. My neighbor's dog had puppies, German Shepherd puppies, and they're looking for homes. She sent me a picture, and I'll admit, even I melted a little. 8 tiny fluff balls, eyes still half closed, snuggling against their mom. They look like they belonged on a calendar, or in one of those viral videos that make you cry in 3 minutes flat. I told her to go for it. She could finally have what she'd always wanted. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I hadn't heard much about the puppy situation. I figured she was just busy. But then, out of the blue, she texted me, "Come over when you're free. I need help with something." When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was the smell. A wet, sour, animal kind of smell that didn't belong in Kaylee's usually pristine house. The second thing I noticed was the barking. Loud, frantic, high-pitched yips that sounded like they were coming from multiple directions. "Kaylee," I called, stepping inside. She appeared from the kitchen, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Her hair was a mess, her shirt was covered in something suspiciously sticky, and there were dark circles under her eyes that made her look like a raccoon. "Oh, thank God you're here," she said, grabbing my arm. "I need you to hold one while I clean up the others." "One what?" I asked, confused. Then I saw them. 3 puppies. Not 1, not 2, 3, all running in chaotic circles around the living room, peeing on the floor and chewing on anything they could reach. "What the hell is this?" I said, staring at the madness. I got a little carried away," Kaylee admitted, her face flushing. "The mom had this whole big litter, and I couldn't just pick one. They all needed homes, and—" "Kaylee," I interrupted, "you can't keep 3 puppies. That's insane." "I know," she said, throwing her hands up. "I know it's a lot, okay? But I thought it'd be fine. Then work got crazy, and they're not sleeping through the night, and they keep eating my shoes. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, scooping up one of the squirming fur balls. It immediately started gnawing on my sleeve. "I thought I could handle it," she said, looking genuinely distraught. "But now I don't know what to do." We spent the next 2 hours cleaning up pee, wrangling puppies, and talking through options. I suggested she keep one and find homes for the other two, but she resisted, saying it would feel like giving up on them. Eventually, I left, promising to help her figure it out. But then something happened that changed everything. The next morning, while scrolling Instagram, I stumbled across a post from a local rescue group. Someone had anonymously reported Kaylee for animal hoarding. There were photos of the puppies, her address, and a plea for donations to save these poor dogs from a neglectful situation. I called Kaylee immediately, furious. "Did you see this?" I demanded. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I woke up to it. Someone knocked on my door this morning, an animal control officer. Who the hell reported you?" I asked. "You're not a hoarder. This is just a misunderstanding." "I don't know," she said, sounding close to tears. "But they want to come back and inspect the house." My gut told me who it was. Her nosy neighbor, Mrs. Kravitz, who once called the cops on me for parking in front of her house. Kaylee tried to defend her, saying the woman probably thought she was helping, but I wasn't buying it. We spent the day cleaning her place top to bottom, making it as puppy-proof as possible. When the officer returned, they agreed the situation wasn't neglectful but warned Kaylee that keeping all three would likely be unsustainable. They suggested rehoming two of them and even offered to help. Here's where things got dicey. I offered to foster one of the puppies temporarily. I didn't have the yard for a shepherd, but I figured it would buy Kaylee time to get things sorted. She thanked me, cried a little, and handed me the tiniest one, a runt she'd named Bear. I fell for Bear hard. He was sweet, quiet, and loved curling up at my feet while I worked. 2 weeks later, Kaylee called and said she was ready to take Bear back. And I hesitated. A lot. I realized I wanted to keep him. When I told her, she exploded. "You promised me this was temporary," she shouted. "How could you do this to me? You knew how much I wanted him." I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to steal her dog, but she wouldn't hear it. She accused me of being selfish, of taking advantage of her when she was vulnerable. The argument got so heated that she hung up on me. Now, she's barely speaking to me, and I'm sitting here, looking at Bear, wondering if I really screwed this up. I didn't mean to hurt her, but I also feel like I gave him a better chance at a calm, stable life. So, AITA? The first sign of trouble was the tomato sauce. I woke up early on a Saturday, excited for a lazy breakfast and some cartoons like I was 8 years old again. I shuffled into the kitchen, half asleep, and there it was on the counter. A half-empty jar of tomato sauce, its lid cocked at an angle, slowly oozing red goop onto the counter. Next to it was a dirty butter knife. Why anyone would need a butter knife for tomato sauce, I couldn't even guess. But the real kicker? The trail of sauce leading to the fridge, then across the floor, then abruptly ending at the microwave. It looked like the scene of a crime. "Tim!" I shouted toward his bedroom. "Did you make some kind of midnight spaghetti disaster?" No response. Typical. Tim wasn't just a slob. He was artistic about it. He could make a mess out of anything. A PB&J? Somehow, there'd be jelly smears on the wall. Toast? The crumbs would form a perfect outline of the bread, as if he was trying to fossilize his meals. Living with him was like having a very sloppy, very passive-aggressive ghost. But I was patient. I cleaned up the sauce trail, muttering under my breath, and carried on with my day. Until the next thing happened. I came back from the grocery store to find my plant, Susan, a fiddle leaf fig I'd been nursing back to health, missing. The pot was still there, sitting in its usual spot by the window, but Susan? Gone. Vanished. I turned around, and there was Tim, casually eating a bowl of cereal like nothing was wrong. "Where's Susan?" I demanded. He blinked at me, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Who's Susan?" "My plant. My beautiful, barely alive plant that I've been keeping alive for 6 months." "Oh." Tim looked at me, then at his cereal, then back at me. "She's outside. She needed sunlight. She gets sunlight right there. That's why I put her there." "Yeah, but like direct sunlight." I stormed out to the balcony and, sure enough, there was Susan, her leaves already crisping in the afternoon heat. I brought her back inside, glaring at Tim as I did. "You're not allowed to touch my plants. Ever." "Cool, cool." he said, and went back to slurping his cereal. That was the moment I decided I was done. I wasn't going to clean up his messes, wasn't going to coddle him, wasn't going to nag. I just stopped, let him live in his own filth and figure it out. The results were immediate. By the end of the week, the sink was a biohazard. The pile of dishes had gotten so tall, I was pretty sure it was structurally unsound. The trash can overflowed to the point where Tim had started using one of my reusable grocery bags as an overflow trash bag. And the fridge? A wasteland of half-eaten leftovers and expired condiments. I knew for a fact there was a yogurt container in there from before we moved in. I didn't say anything. I just let it all pile up. But then, Tim retaliated. At least, I think he did. One night, I came home late from work to find the apartment spotless. The dishes were washed and stacked neatly on the drying rack. The floors were mopped. Even Susan had been dusted off and moved back to her original spot. I was so shocked, I almost cried tears of joy. But then I noticed the post-it note stuck to the fridge. I cleaned this whole place. Just thought you should know. Tim. It was like he thought he'd done me a favor, when really, he just cleaned up his own mess. I couldn't let that slide. The next day, I pulled a power move of my own. I made pancakes. Pancakes for me and only me. I cooked them, ate them, and then left the dirty mixing bowl, spatula, and frying pan right in the middle of the counter. I didn't even rinse them. It was petty. It was deliberate. And it felt amazing. Tim responded by leaving an empty cereal box on top of the fridge, which, for some reason, drove me absolutely insane. I retaliated by taking the batteries out of the TV remote. He escalated by hiding my phone charger. I countered by unplugging the Wi-Fi router and hiding it in my room. By the end of the month, our apartment looked like the aftermath of a frat party hosted by gremlins. The bathroom had grown some kind of sentient mildew colony in the shower. The living room smelled faintly of burnt popcorn and shame. And the kitchen? A full-on apocalyptic zone. Then one night, everything came to a head. It started when I went to pour myself a glass of orange juice, only to find that Tim had left the carton in the fridge with half an ounce of juice left. Furious, I stormed into his room, ready to unleash a rant that would go down in roommate history. But when I opened the door, Tim was sitting there on the floor, surrounded by open takeout containers, playing a video game. He looked up at me, chopsticks in hand, and said, "Oh, hey, can you close that? The AC's on." Something inside me snapped. I walked over to his desk, grabbed the takeout container he was eating from, and chucked it into the trash. He froze. "What the hell, man?" "No, Tim. What the hell? You've been treating this apartment like a dump for weeks. I can't live like this anymore." He stood up, chopstick still in hand, and yelled, "Oh, I'm the problem? You've been leaving your passive-aggressive messes everywhere just to prove a point. Because you never clean. Because you're obsessed with it." We went back and forth for a solid 10 minutes, each of us airing every petty grievance we'd been holding onto for months. It was ugly. At one point, I think I accused him of being genetically incapable of respecting countertops, and he called me a dictator with a Swiffer. But somehow, after all the yelling, we ended up laughing. Maybe it was the absurdity of the situation, or maybe we were both just too exhausted to keep fighting. We sat on the couch, surrounded by the wreckage of our shared chaos, and made a deal. We'd clean the apartment together, right then and there, and start over with an actual plan. It took us until 3 a.m., but we did it. The place looked better than it had in months. Tim even apologized to Susan. Still, I can't shake the feeling that this whole thing could have been avoided if we just talked to each other like normal people. So, Reddit. AITA? Growing up, my cousin Danny was the closest thing I had to a brother. He was the cool one, always showing me the newest games, letting me ride on his bike's handlebars, and teaching me things I probably shouldn't have known at 10 years old. He was also notoriously careless with his stuff. Broken phones, lost wallets, a laptop he once left on the roof of his car. Danny had a reputation for it. So, when he moved into my apartment for a few months while he figured his life out, I wasn't too worried about borrowing his fancy gaming headset. After all, he owed me for letting him crash on my couch rent-free. Or so I thought. The headset wasn't just any headset. It was some top-of-the-line, limited edition contraption with noise canceling, surround sound, and all these bells and whistles that made me feel like I was sitting in the middle of a spaceship. Danny had bought it after landing a freelance gig editing audio for a podcast. One of his many big plans that never seemed to pan out. When he moved in, he made a big deal about keeping the headset safe, even showing me how to store it in its little case. "Don't touch it," he'd said. "Seriously, man. I need this for work." I nodded along, fully intending to respect his wishes. But then last Friday happened. It started innocently enough. I'd had a long day at work, and all I wanted was to unwind with a couple of hours of gaming. My own headphones were busted. Cheap. Falling apart, things that crackled like popcorn every time the sound got too loud. Danny wasn't home, and his headset was just sitting there on the coffee table, looking all sleek and inviting. I told myself I'd only use it for a little while. Just one match. Maybe two. As soon as I put it on, I knew I was in trouble. The sound was incredible. It was like stepping into another world. One match turned into 3, then 5, then an entire evening of getting lost in the game. At some point, I took the headset off to stretch and accidentally dropped it. It hit the floor with a sickening crack. My stomach plummeted. I picked it up, inspecting it for damage. There was a small dent in the plastic and a hairline crack near the left ear cup. It still worked fine when I tested it, so I figured it wasn't a big deal. I put it back in its case, careful to position it like Danny had shown me, and vowed never to touch it again. The next morning, Danny came back from his overnight shift, and I could tell he was in a bad mood. He dropped his bag by the door and went straight for his headset, muttering something about a client call. He opened the case, froze, and turned to me with a look that could have melted steel. "What happened to my headset?" I played dumb. "What do you mean?" "This," he said, holding it up and pointing to the crack. "It wasn't like this before." I hesitated for a split second too long, and he pounced. "You used it, didn't you? I told you not to touch it." "Okay, yes, I used it," I admitted, raising my hands defensively, "but it still works fine. I barely dropped it." "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" he repeated, his voice rising. "This thing cost me $400. It's the only decent piece of equipment I have, and you couldn't even respect that?" I scoffed. "Come on, Danny. You leave your stuff lying around all the time. If it's so important, maybe you should take better care of it." His face turned red, and for a second, I thought he might actually throw the headset at me. That's rich, coming from the guy who borrowed my car last year and brought it back with a dented bumper. "That was different," I shot back. "You said I could use the car. And you didn't ask about the headset?" We went back and forth like that for what felt like forever. He accused me of being selfish and careless, of never thinking about anyone but myself. I countered by bringing up all the times I'd bailed him out, letting him crash at my place, spotting him money for food, covering for him with our aunt when he forgot her birthday. I told him he was being a hypocrite, that he had no right to lecture me about respect when he'd freeloaded off me for months. "You think I wanted to move in here?" he snapped. "You think I enjoy living on your couch, listening to you lecture me about responsibility while you wreck my stuff? You're not exactly doing anything to change that, are you?" I fired back. "Maybe if you spent less time blaming other people for your problems and more time getting your act together, you wouldn't be in this situation." Danny's jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he might punch me. Instead, he shook his head and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He didn't come back that night, or the next. When I texted him, he left me on read. I didn't think much of it at first. Danny had a habit of disappearing when he was pissed, but then I got a Venmo request from him for $400. No message, just the amount. I stared at it for a long time, torn between guilt and anger. On one hand, I knew I'd screwed up. I shouldn't have touched the headset. On the other hand, it wasn't like I'd broken it beyond repair. And what about all the times I'd helped him out without expecting anything in return? Wasn't that worth something? Now the apartment feels weirdly empty without him, and I can't shake this nagging feeling that maybe I took things too far. But at the same time, he's the one who walked out over a tiny crack in some overpriced headphones. It all started because of the Secret Santa debacle. Our office does it every year, and it's usually fun in a forced, corporate-mandated way. You know, mugs with puns, a Starbucks gift card, maybe a quirky pair of socks. But this year, someone decided to take the whole secret part a little too seriously. By someone, I mean Kevin, our resident prankster and self-proclaimed office comedian. Kevin pulled my name, and instead of giving me a gift, he gave me an elaborate scavenger hunt around the building. It wasn't just to find the next clue deal either. He taped a riddle to the water cooler, hid the next under a potted plant, and forced me to crawl under the conference table during a client meeting to find another. The grand finale? I ended up in the supply closet with a box of paper clips and a note that read, "Merry Christmas, you cheapskate. This is what you deserve for stealing my granola bar last month." Okay, I'll admit it. I did take his granola bar. But that was weeks ago, and who keeps tabs on granola bars like they're gold bullion? The scavenger hunt wasn't just embarrassing. It was publicly embarrassing. Everyone laughed, even the janitor, who doesn't even speak to us unless he's asking us to move our chairs. So, naturally, I decided to even the score. Kevin loves his precious fish tank. He talks about it like it's the Sistine Chapel of aquatic ecosystems. "My clownfish are thriving," he'll say, leaning back like a proud father. "They're very particular about their environment, you know?" He once spent an entire lunch break explaining how he hand-feeds his shrimp because store-bought food doesn't meet their nutritional needs. It was just too easy. I went online, ordered a set of tiny plastic scuba divers, and slipped them into his tank one evening after work. The next morning, I casually strolled past his desk, coffee in hand, as he did a double take. "What the? Who put these in here?" he asked, holding up one of the divers like it was evidence in a murder trial. I shrugged, deadpan. "Maybe your clownfish hired them. Tough times in the ocean economy." For a moment, he looked impressed. Then he narrowed his eyes. "You're gonna regret this." The next day, my screensaver was changed to a looping clip of me from the office karaoke night, drunkenly butchering Livin' on a Prayer. I only found out when the CFO stopped by my desk and said, "Big Bon Jovi fan, huh? Game on." I printed out a giant, life-sized poster of Kevin's driver's license photo. Unflattering doesn't even begin to describe it, and taped it to the break room fridge with a speech bubble that said, "I'm watching you take that yogurt, Carol." Kevin retaliated by switching the labels on my desktop folders, so my Q1 reports opened a folder full of cat memes, and personal contained nothing but my actual Q1 reports. I had to explain the mix-up during a client presentation, which, let me tell you, did wonders for my credibility. But then Kevin went too far. One Friday afternoon, as I packed up to leave, I noticed a strange smell. It was faint but unmistakable, like old cheese and despair. At first, I thought someone had left their lunch in the trash again. But no, the smell was coming from my bag. When I opened it, I found a ripe block of Limburger cheese wrapped in a note that read, "Revenge stinks, doesn't it?" That was it. I was done playing defense. If Kevin wanted war, I'd give him war. I waited until the next company-wide Zoom meeting, the one where our CEO gave a quarterly update. Kevin always joined with his camera off and his mic muted, so I hacked his background. Technically, it wasn't hacking. It was more like borrowing his laptop while he was at lunch. I changed his virtual background to an image of a neon pink unicorn farting rainbows, with the words, "I'm the office prank king," in Comic Sans. When he logged in, the entire company got a front row seat. Kevin's camera came on, his face pale with horror. The CEO paused mid-sentence and said, "Kevin, is there something you'd like to share with the team?" After the meeting, Kevin stormed over to my desk. "You've made a powerful enemy today," he hissed, which made me laugh harder than it should have. But Kevin wasn't bluffing. That weekend, I woke up to dozens of emails from coworkers, all containing a link to my college YouTube channel. I'd completely forgotten it existed. Kevin had found it. Every cringy skit, every poorly edited parody video. There was even a music video where I rapped about failing calculus. Kevin didn't just share the link. He emailed it to the entire office. For 2 weeks, I couldn't walk into the break room without someone quoting my terrible rhymes. "Yo, my name is Pat, and I can't do math," became the unofficial slogan of the accounting department. I wanted to kill him. Instead, I went nuclear. I hired a guy, not a hitman, obviously, but one of those professional clowns you can book for birthday parties. I gave him Kevin's home address, a stack of balloons, and a simple instruction. show up uninvited and make Kevin's life hell. From what I heard later, the clown didn't just deliver balloons. He also performed a 1-hour interpretive dance on Kevin's lawn, narrated Kevin's life story using sock puppets, and refused to leave until Kevin signed a fake certificate declaring him world's best boss. Kevin was not amused. I thought it was over. I thought I'd won. But then Monday morning rolled around, and I walked into the office to find my cubicle wrapped in aluminum foil. Every surface, every pin, even my chair was shiny and metallic. On my desk was a single card that read, "You can't outshine me." For most of my life, I've prided myself on being the go-to guy for my best friend Carl. Need a ride to the airport? Call me. Broke down on the freeway at midnight? I'm your guy. Trouble with the girlfriend? Let me grab coffee and my listening ears. I wasn't just dependable. I was Carl's personal Swiss Army knife for every inconvenient, messy, or complicated situation in his life. It never even crossed my mind to say no, until the iguana incident. It started with a frantic text. "Carl, dude, emergency. Need your help now." My brain went at car accidents, house fires, or maybe something like a lost wallet. What I didn't expect was to walk into his apartment and find a giant iguana perched on his kitchen counter, glaring at me like I was trespassing. "I can explain," Carl said, holding a broom like a weapon. "Okay, actually, I can't really explain, but he got out of his cage, and now he's there. And he's mad." "Why do you even have an iguana?" I asked, inching closer to the scene like a rookie cop in a horror movie. "It was for Jessica's nephew's birthday party last weekend. I thought it would be cool, but she dumped me, and now I'm stuck with him. Can we focus on the problem?" The problem hissed, and Carl yelped like a child. And like always, I stepped in. An hour later, after a complicated maneuver involving a bedsheet and way more adrenaline than I'd bargained for, the iguana was safely back in its cage. I collapsed on Carl's couch, sweating, while he grabbed us beers like it was some casual Tuesday. "Man, you're a lifesaver," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He meant it as a compliment, but as I looked at the half-empty pizza boxes on his floor, the pile of unreturned Amazon packages by the door, and the sheer chaos of his life, something inside me twisted. I wasn't his friend. I was his unpaid intern, running damage control for every bad decision he made. That realization simmered for weeks. I started noticing all the little ways Carl leaned on me like I was a human crutch. When he couldn't pay his electric bill because he'd blown his money on concert tickets, I lent him $200. When his boss chewed him out for being late, I was the one who helped him draft an apology email. I wasn't just a good friend. I was his backup adult. The boiling point came when Carl showed up unannounced at my apartment. It was 9 p.m. I was halfway through a bottle of wine and a true crime documentary, and I was finally enjoying some much-needed me time. But no, Carl had urgent business. "Dude," he said, barging in, "I need you to drive me to Jenny's." Jenny was his ex, the one who had dumped him 2 months ago after catching him flirting with her coworker. She had since blocked him on every platform, and yet he was convinced tonight was the night to make things right. "No," I said, flatly. He froze. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I repeated. "I'm not driving you to Jenny's. I'm not helping you get her back. I'm not doing this anymore." Carl stared at me like I'd just told him I'd burned his childhood home to the ground. "But you always help me." "Yeah, I do," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "And that's the problem. You don't even try to handle your own problems because you know I'll swoop in and fix everything. It's exhausting, Carl. I can't keep doing it." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. Instead, he laughed bitterly. "Wow. So, you're just gonna leave me hanging? Some friend you are. Some friend you are." I shot back. "You don't even see me as a person. I'm just a safety net for you to fall into whenever you screw up." Carl didn't respond. He just grabbed his jacket and stormed out, muttering something about how I was unbelievable. I sat there, stunned, for a long time. Part of me wanted to chase after him, to apologize, to fix this, too. But I didn't. For once, I let the moment break without trying to glue it back together. The fallout was predictably messy. Carl didn't talk to me for weeks. When he finally did, it was a text, "Hey, Iguana's gone. Just thought you'd want to know." No apology. No acknowledgement of our fight. Just Carl being Carl. A big part of me feels lighter without his constant chaos weighing me down. But another part of me wonders if I was too harsh. Should I have been more patient? Tried harder to explain? Or is there a point where even the best friendship has to take a back seat to your own sanity? The call from the vet came as I was halfway through cleaning up the catastrophe that had once been my kitchen. Teddy, my 3-year-old rescue cat with more personality than most people I know, had knocked an entire loaf of bread onto the floor, shredded the plastic, and apparently decided that carbs were beneath him. Flour footprints trailed everywhere. I was muttering curses under my breath when my phone buzzed. "Hi, is this Claire? This is Dr. Martin from Lakeview Vet." "Yes," I said, brushing flour off my shirt. "What's up?" "I got the results of Teddy's scan. It looks like he has a tumor on his pancreas. We can remove it, but the surgery is complex, and there are risks. We need to act quickly to give him the best chance." I froze, the broom clattering to the floor. Teddy, oblivious, perched on the counter like the world's fluffiest gargoyle, licking his paw. A tumor. Surgery. Risks. The words echoed in my head, hollow and surreal. "How quickly?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. "We'd need to schedule it within the next week," Dr. Martin replied. "I'll email you the details." I thanked her and hung up, staring at Teddy, who now looked far too smug for someone with a life-threatening diagnosis. "You really couldn't let me have one peaceful day, could you?" I whispered, my throat tightening. When my sister Mia came over that evening, I told her everything. Teddy had been her idea. After all, she was the one who had dragged me to the shelter, insisting that I needed a companion. "You're too comfortable alone," she'd said, like that was a bad thing. Teddy had picked me, leaping into my lap and headbutting my chin with zero regard for my personal space. "Teddy? A tumor?" Mia said, her voice cracking. She reached down to pet him, and he rewarded her with a disdainful glare. "He doesn't seem sick." "He's not acting like it," I said, sitting down across from her. "But the vet said it's serious. They can remove it, but the surgery is complicated. Expensive too." "How expensive?" I named the figure, and Mia winced. "Wow, that's a lot." "I know," I said, my fingers gripping the edge of the table, "but I'm willing to pay it. He's only 3, Mia. He has so much life ahead of him." She nodded slowly, but didn't say anything right away. Finally, she glanced at Teddy, who had sprawled out in the middle of the kitchen floor like he owned the place. "I don't know, Claire. Are you sure it's the right thing for him?" "What do you mean?" I asked, frowning. She hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully. "It's just, he's a cat. Surgery like that is a huge deal. He's not going to understand what's happening. The recovery process will probably be miserable for him. What if it's kinder to just, let him be comfortable?" "Let him be comfortable?" My voice rose involuntarily. "Until when? Until it kills him? He's fine right now. He could live a long, healthy life if we do this. Or he might not," Mia said softly. "What if the surgery doesn't work? Or what if it does, but he's never the same? Cats don't bounce back the way we do. They don't understand why they're in pain." My hands clenched into fists. "So what are you saying? That I should just give up on him?" "No," Mia said firmly. "I'm saying that sometimes the kindest thing is the hardest thing. I'm just worried you're not thinking about what's best for him because you're too focused on keeping him with you." "That's not fair," I snapped. "He's young. He has a chance. How can I not take it?" Mia sighed and stood up, pacing the small kitchen. "I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying think about it. Really think about it. Teddy's not like a person. He doesn't care about the future. He just knows how he feels right now." I didn't sleep much that night. Teddy curled up beside me in bed, purring contentedly as if he weren't carrying the weight of my decision on his tiny shoulders. I kept replaying Mia's words in my head. Was I doing this for him, or for me? Was it selfish to put him through pain for the chance of saving him, or selfish to let him go because I was scared of failing him? The next morning, I called the vet again. Dr. Martin patiently walked me through the details of the surgery, the recovery, the risks. It's not an easy road, she said, but it's doable. And if it's successful, he could have many good years ahead of him. Could, I echoed, staring at Teddy as he batted a pin off the counter. Not will. There are no guarantees, Dr. Martin said gently, but you know him best. Whatever decision you make will be the right one for him. I hung up and spent the next hour Googling stories of cats who had undergone similar surgeries. Some were heartwarming. Others were devastating. I couldn't stop picturing Teddy, doped up on pain meds, glaring at me from a recovery cone like I was his mortal enemy. Could I really do that to him? Could I live with myself if I didn't? Mia came back that evening, bringing a bottle of wine and a box of cookies, the universal offering for difficult conversations. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking you might be right, I admitted reluctantly, but I don't know if I can give up on him. Mia nodded, pouring us each a glass. I don't want you to give up on him. I just want you to be sure it's for the right reasons. I stared at Teddy, who was now attacking a feather toy with his usual ferocity. He's not ready to go, I said finally, and neither am I. We scheduled the surgery for the following week. The night before, I sat with Teddy on the couch, stroking his fur as he dozed against my leg. You better come through this, you little bread thief, I whispered. I'm putting my faith in you. Now, he's in recovery, confined to a small room where he can't jump or run. He hates the cone, the medicine, the limitations, but he's eating, purring, and swatting at my shoelaces when I come to visit him. He's fighting, and for now, that's enough. When the email from Elena hit my inbox, the subject line felt like a siren. Big favor. Need you more than ever. I hesitated before clicking it, knowing exactly what it was going to be. Elena, my best friend since college, didn't believe in small asks. Sure enough, the email was a wall of text, the kind you instinctively skim but can't quite ignore. She'd landed an incredible opportunity to direct her first short film, but the budget had fallen apart at the last minute. She needed $10,000. Not just needed, urgently needed. The kicker? She wanted me to front it. I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. It wasn't that I didn't want to help, but $10,000 wasn't pocket change. My wife, Amanda, and I had been saving for years to adopt a child. Every dollar mattered. I knew what Elena would say if I told her. She'd tell me how money comes and goes, how dreams don't wait. She'd remind me that I promised to always believe in her talent. And I did believe in her. But this was a whole other level of trust fall. I closed the email without replying. That night, over dinner, I broached the topic with Amanda. Elena emailed me, I said carefully, twirling spaghetti on my fork. She wants to borrow 10 grand for her film. Amanda froze mid-bite. 10,000? She repeated, as if the word itself were ridiculous. For what, exactly? She's directing her first short film. The financing fell apart, and she's desperate. Amanda put her fork down and leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful but firm. I get that she's your best friend, but we can't just drain our savings. That's our adoption fund. You know that. I know, I said quickly. I'm not saying I'll do it. I hesitated. It feels wrong to say no outright. She's been there for me so many times. What if this is her big break? Amanda tilted her head, her voice softening. What if it's not? And then we're down $10,000 and still waiting for a chance to start a family? Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I hated the way they made sense, but I also hated the idea of letting Elena down. I replied to her email the next morning. Elena, I want to help, but $10,000 is more than I can manage. Can we talk about alternatives? Maybe crowdfunding? Or a smaller loan? She called me 2 minutes later. I braced myself. What do you mean you can't manage it? She asked, her voice sharp. You've always said you'd support me no matter what. I'm not asking for a handout. I'll pay you back. Elena, I said gently, it's not that I don't want to help, but Amanda and I are saving for the adoption. It's everything to us. You know that. And my dream doesn't matter, she shot back. You're just going to let me fail because you don't feel like taking a little risk? It's not a little risk, I said, my voice rising despite myself. It's 10 grand. That's months, years of saving for us. She scoffed. It's just money, Adam. You and Amanda have stable jobs, a house. You'll make it back. This film could launch my career. One day, when I'm directing features, you'll say you believed in me from the start. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. It's not about believing in you, Elena. It's about priorities. And my family comes first. You sound like a corporate drone, she spat. Since when did you start thinking like this? You used to be passionate. You used to care about art. Now you're just safe. Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I'd spent most of my 20s chasing passion projects, living paycheck to paycheck. Elena had been part of that life. But things had changed. I had changed. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said quietly. I can't give you the money. If that means you hate me, I'll have to live with it. There was a long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was icy. You don't get it. You never will. The line went dead. The rest of the day, I walked around with a knot in my chest. I tried to focus on work, but her words kept echoing in my head. You used to care. You don't get it. A week later, I saw Elena's Instagram post. A candid shot of her on set, laughing with her cast and crew. The caption read, "Never give up on your dreams, even when the people closest to you won't support you. You'll find a way. Always." Movie camera sparkles. My stomach churned. Was that aimed at me? I wanted to call her, but I couldn't figure out what I'd say. Every version of the conversation ended in an argument. So I stayed silent. Amanda noticed my mood that evening. Still thinking about Elena? She figured it out, I said, trying to keep my tone light. She's on set now. Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. Good for her. But you made the right choice, Adam. Did I? The question escaped before I could stop it. Amanda reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You did the right thing. For us, for our future. If she can't see that, maybe she's not the friend you think she is. I nodded, but Amanda's words didn't ease the ache. Elena and I had been through so much together. If this was the thing that broke us, what did that say about our friendship? 2 months later, I got an invitation to the film's premiere. I almost didn't go, but Amanda convinced me it was the mature thing to do. The night of the screening, I sat in the back of the theater, watching Elena's film unfold. It was raw, beautiful, and painfully honest. A story about betrayal, ambition, and the cost of chasing dreams. The protagonist, a struggling filmmaker, was betrayed by her closest friend, a man too safe to believe in her vision. My stomach sank as I realized who that character was meant to represent. After the credits rolled, I slipped out before the lights came up. Elena never even saw me. So here I am, asking you, AITA? Should I have risked it all for her dream, even if it meant putting my family's future on the line? Or was I right to draw a boundary, knowing how much it would cost me? Jamie and I had always prided ourselves on being a team. Sure, we weren't perfect. We'd fought over what color to paint the living room. They wanted warm oatmeal, and I wanted literally anything that didn't sound like breakfast. We'd debated thermostat settings, toothpaste brands, and whether to hang their college degree on the wall. But the one thing we always agreed on was that we could work things out. Until the pet incident. It started innocently enough. Jamie and I were binge-watching a nature documentary one night. Some narrator with a soothing British accent droning on about the symbiosis between wolves and ravens. I said, wouldn't it be cool to have a dog? Like, an actual wolf descendant? Jamie didn't even look up from their popcorn. I've always wanted a cat. They're like the perfect animal. Quiet, clean, elegant. I paused the show. Elegant? Who wants an elegant pet? That's like saying you want a tuxedo that purrs. They're independent, Jamie said. They don't drool on your shoes or wake you up at 6 a.m. to pee. Dogs have personality, I argued. They're fun. They're your buddy. Cats have personality, Jamie shot back. They just don't need to flaunt it like a Labrador doing backflips for a tennis ball. And so, the battle lines were drawn. At first, it was just playful ribbing. Jamie would text me memes of cats sitting in ridiculous positions with captions like, "Too dignified for dogs." I retaliated with videos of golden retrievers catching frisbees mid-air. But slowly, the jokes turned into something more serious. The idea of getting a pet was no longer hypothetical. It was a looming decision we couldn't seem to make. One night, Jamie came home from work with a folder. Not just any folder, a cat folder. It had printed articles about the benefits of owning a cat, a list of low-shedding breeds, and even a spreadsheet comparing litter box brands. I stared at it like it was radioactive. "You made a pitch deck?" I asked. Jamie ignored my tone. "If we're going to do this, we need to do it responsibly. Cats are less maintenance, cheaper, and boring," I interrupted. "They're boring, Jamie. They're soothing. They're furniture that meows." Jamie sighed. "Okay, what's your plan? Are you going to carry a 70-pound dog up and down our apartment stairs every day when it's too tired to walk?" "I'll work out more," I said, flexing pathetically. Jamie rolled their eyes so hard I thought they might sprain something. That weekend, we decided to test the waters. We visited Jamie's friend Ava, who owned 3 cats. "You'll love them," Jamie said as we walked into Ava's house. "They're so chill." They were not chill. One cat was perched on top of the fridge, glaring at me like I owed it money. Another was shredding the couch in the corner, and the third, which Jamie insisted was friendly, hissed the second I stepped into the living room. Ava laughed nervously and offered me tea, but I couldn't hear her over the sound of Jamie whispering, "They're not always like this." On the drive home, I tried to be tactful. "So, cats seem intense." Jamie glared out the window. They were having an off day. To be fair, my test case didn't go much better. A week later, we visited my coworker Tony, who had a Great Dane named Moose. The second Moose saw us. He leapt onto Jamie, knocking them backward into Tony's potted fern. Jamie spent the rest of the visit picking dog hair off their pants and glaring at me like I'd personally trained Moose to sabotage them. "This is what you want in our apartment?" Jamie asked as we left. "A horse that thinks it's a lapdog? It's better than a house full of hissy fits," I muttered. By now, the tension was palpable. We stopped joking about it and started avoiding the topic entirely. But it was always there, hanging over us like a storm cloud. Then came the compromise dinner. Jamie had made lasagna, their "I'm about to ask you for something" dish, and I could tell by the nervous way they fiddled with their fork that this wasn't just a casual meal. Halfway through, they said, "What if we didn't get a dog or a cat?" I froze. "What, like a guinea pig?" "No, like a less divisive pet. A parrot, maybe, or a lizard." I stared at them. "You want to replace a loyal companion or a cozy lap warmer with a reptile?" Jamie frowned. "Bearded dragons are cuddly." "No," I said firmly. "They are not." The dinner ended in silence, both of us too stubborn to budge. For the first time in our relationship, I wondered if this might be the thing that broke us. Not cheating or money problems or differing life goals, just a dumb argument over fur versus scales. But then, something strange happened. One night, while scrolling through a pet adoption website out of habit, I stumbled across a listing that stopped me cold. A bonded pair. 1 dog, 1 cat. The photo showed a scruffy mutt and a black and white cat curled up together, their faces pressed close like they were sharing secrets. "Jamie," I called, my voice trembling. "Come look at this." They shuffled over in their pajamas, holding a mug of tea. "What?" I showed them the screen. "Look, they're together." Jamie blinked, their lips twitching into a reluctant smile. "That's cute, right? Like, really cute." We sat there for a while, staring at the photo. It wasn't a solution, not really, but it felt like a sign. If a dog and a cat could make it work, maybe we could too. So here we are, filling out the application for a bonded pair of misfits who somehow seem to embody everything we both want. It's probably a terrible idea. They might hate our apartment, or each other, or us. But for the first time in weeks, Jamie and I are on the same page. And honestly, that feels like a win. AITA? The argument began with glitter. Well, technically, it began with my sister's bridal shower and the absolutely ridiculous centerpiece ideas that Haley had spent the past 3 weeks obsessing over. I should have seen it coming. Haley was the type of person who could turn a simple dinner party into a logistical nightmare, but I didn't realize just how deep we were until she walked into the living room holding what looked like a weaponized glue gun. "Okay," she said. setting down a box overflowing with ribbons, sequins, and, God help me, glitter. We're going to need to start by spray painting these mason jars gold. Then, we'll layer them with lace and hot glue these mini faux roses on top. I stared at her. What's wrong with regular mason jars? Haley's expression turned into the kind of look you'd give someone who just suggested eating soup with a fork. What's wrong with? Are you kidding me? Regular mason jars are boring, Mia. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. It needs to be perfect. Perfect was Haley's favorite word. She threw it around like confetti whenever she wanted to justify a massive waste of time and energy. It's how we ended up hand-painting 250 favor bags for her friend's baby shower last year. It's also why our bathroom renovation, originally a 2-week project, dragged on for 3 months. Why don't we just not? I suggested, already exhausted. Your sister isn't even into this kind of stuff. She'd probably be happy with, like, a vase of wildflowers. Haley gasped as though I'd suggested murder. Wildflowers? This isn't a picnic, Mia. It's a bridal shower. It's not even your bridal shower. And there it was. The sentence that flipped the switch. Haley dropped her glue gun like a gauntlet and crossed her arms. Excuse me? You heard me, I said, folding my own arms. You've completely hijacked this thing. When was the last time you even asked your sister what she wanted? Haley's face went red. Not with embarrassment, but with the righteous indignation of someone who truly believed she was in the right. I know what she wants. She's indecisive, and she trusts me to handle this. Or, I countered, she's too nice to tell you to back off. That's when the gloves came off. Haley insisted she was just saving the shower from becoming a disaster, while I pointed out that her idea of saving was basically bulldozing. Voices rose, accusations flew, and by the end of it, I was threatening to skip the shower altogether while Haley declared I was selfish and ungrateful. Here's where the petty escalation comes in. The next morning, I texted Haley's sister, Clara, directly. I told her I thought she should take charge of her own bridal shower because it was her day, and she deserved to have it the way she wanted. Clara, bless her diplomatic soul, thanked me but said she didn't want to hurt Haley's feelings. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. That afternoon, I went out and bought the biggest, gaudiest bouquet of fake wildflowers I could find. Bright yellows, neon pinks, obnoxious purples. It was a carnival in floral form. Then I stuck them in a plain mason jar and slapped a ribbon on it. A single ribbon. No glitter, no lace, no roses. When Haley got home and saw it on the kitchen table, she froze. What is that? It's a centerpiece, I said casually. Simple, elegant, functional. It's hideous. It's what Clara wanted. Her eyes narrowed. Clara didn't ask for that. No, but she didn't ask for gold spray-painted jars either. Haley stormed off, muttering something about me ruining everything. I figured that was the end of it, until the next day, when I found the wildflower arrangement stuffed into the back of a closet. In its place on the table was a lineup of freshly spray-painted mason jars, glittering like cursed treasure. Oh, no you don't, I said under my breath. I grabbed every single jar, marched out to the backyard, and shoved them into the recycling bin. Then I texted Clara, emergency meeting. Your house. Tonight. Bring snacks. By the time Haley realized the jars were gone, Clara and I were already deep in planning mode at her place. Clara admitted she hated the whole craft store explosion vibe Haley was pushing and just wanted something laid back and fun. So we made new plans, Clara's plans, and decided not to tell Haley until the day of the shower. What followed was a week of pure psychological warfare. Haley kept trying to sneak her glitter bombs into the equation, while I sabotaged her efforts at every turn. She'd stay up late gluing ribbons, only to find them mysteriously misplaced the next morning. I intercepted her craft store deliveries, redirected her email confirmations, and even deleted the Pinterest board she'd made for inspiration. When the day of the shower arrived, Haley walked into the venue expecting a Martha Stewart fever dream. Instead, she found wildflowers in plain vases, mismatched tablecloths, and a playlist of Clara's favorite 90s jams blasting from a Bluetooth speaker. She looked like she'd just been told her car was on fire. What is this? she asked, her voice trembling. This, I said, gesturing grandly, is Clara's bridal shower. Clara chimed in, clearly nervous but trying to stand her ground. Yeah, Haley. I wanted something simple. Mia helped me pull it together. Haley's jaw clenched. You mean Mia hijacked my plans? No, I said, stepping between them. I unhijacked them. You were planning your shower, not hers. For a moment, I thought Haley was going to scream. Instead, she turned on her heel and left. She didn't speak to me, or Clara, for 3 days. Now, here's the kicker. Everyone at the shower had a great time. Clara said it was exactly what she wanted, and even the guests complimented the relaxed vibe. But Haley still insists I overstepped, that I ruined everything, and that she was just trying to make the day special. So, Reddit, AITA? When the idea first came to me, it was like a flash of lightning. Bold, thrilling, and way too bright to ignore. Let's stage a heist. I told my boyfriend, Max, waving a spoon around like it was a cigar and I was some big shot mob boss. He stared at me from across the kitchen island, chewing a piece of toast like I just suggested we rob a bank. It's not a real heist, I clarified. It's for Clara's birthday. Clara, my best friend, my ride or die, my crime partner in a parallel universe. Her 30th birthday was coming up, and I wanted something unforgettable, not some overpriced brunch or a Pinterest-perfect dinner party. Something that screamed, you're not just getting older, you're leveling up. Max wiped crumbs off his hands, looking skeptical. What does heist mean exactly? Because if it involves ski masks, I'm out. It's a party theme, I explained. Think Spy Games. Everyone gets a mission, there's a fake vault, laser mazes, and Clara gets to play the mastermind. She's always wanted to be the boss. Max raised an eyebrow. She told you that? Not in so many words, I admitted. But she loves crime shows and escape rooms. This is like her ultimate fantasy. Max gave me the look he always gave when I got too excited about one of my harebrained schemes. The mix of amusement and impending doom. Okay, he said, so what's my role in all this? I beamed. You're in charge of logistics. Setting up the vault. Figuring out the clues. You're the tech guy, like in the movies. Great, he deadpanned. Can I at least wear a cool headset? Obviously. He sighed, but I could tell he was in. That's the thing about Max. He loves Clara almost as much as I do. The next morning, while I was sketching plans for the fake vault on the back of an old grocery receipt, Max dropped his bombshell. Or, he said casually, we could just take her to a beach house for the weekend. I froze mid-sketch. What? A beach house, he repeated. Something simple, relaxing. You know, what people actually want for their birthdays. People? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Or you. Me, he admitted. And probably Clara. You ever notice how she hates group activities? Like, remember last year at karaoke when she mysteriously lost her voice right before her turn? That's because she didn't want to sing, I said. Exactly. But this isn't karaoke, I argued. This is her chance to be the hero, the star of the show. You really think she'd prefer? What? Sitting on a beach staring at the ocean? Max shrugged. Yes. No way, I said, stabbing the air with my pencil. She's gonna love this. It's clever. It's fun. It's us. Max leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. But is it her? That stopped me for a second, but only a second. Of course it is. We've been best friends since 8th grade. I know her better than anyone. Max didn't argue. He just gave me that annoying, knowing smile, like he already had the upper hand but was too polite to say it. Over the next week, I threw myself into planning. I recruited Clara's friends, assigned roles, and even convinced my coworker Mark to loan me his fog machine. Max, meanwhile, emailed me links to quiet Airbnb rentals with captions like, "Doesn't this look peaceful?" and "Check out the hot tub." I ignored him. Mostly. The thing was, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that he might have a point. Clara wasn't exactly the type to revel in the spotlight, but she also wasn't a wallflower. She loved a good story, a good adventure. I convinced myself she'd appreciate the creativity, even if it was a little over the top. By the time the big day arrived, the stage was set. Literally. Max and I had turned my apartment into a makeshift heist headquarters, complete with fake blueprints, motion sensors, and a vault made of cardboard and duct tape. Clara showed up blindfolded, as per the invitation instructions, and I could hardly contain my excitement as I led her inside. "Okay," I said, whipping off the blindfold. "Here's the deal. You're the mastermind. The crew is here." I gestured to her bewildered friends. "And your mission is to steal the priceless gem hidden in the vault before time runs out." Clara blinked, taking it all in. Then she did something I hadn't anticipated. She laughed. Not an "I'm excited" laugh, but a "what have you done" laugh. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "This is a lot." My heart sank. "A lot good or a lot bad?" "Just a lot," she said again, glancing around. "I mean, it's cool, but you didn't have to do all this." I felt a pang of panic. "You don't like it?" "It's not that," she said quickly. "It's just, you know me. I'm more of a hang out on the couch kind of person." I opened my mouth to respond, but Max stepped in first, holding up a bag. "Good thing I brought a plan B," he said, pulling out a bottle of wine and a deck of cards. Clara lit up. "Now that sounds perfect." The rest of the night was a mix of awkward improvisation and quiet laughter. We ended up ditching the heist halfway through and just sat around eating pizza, playing card games and reminiscing. Clara looked genuinely happy, and Max looked smug, which made me want to kick him under the table. Later, when the guests had gone and it was just the three of us, Clara hugged me tightly. "Thanks for tonight," she said. "You always go all out, and I love that about you, even if it's a little intense sometimes." I laughed, but it stung a little. "I just wanted to make it special." "It was," she said, smiling. "But you know what's always special to me? Just being with you guys." After she left, Max gave me that look again, the one that was equal parts smug and affectionate. "So," he said, "was it worth it?" I groaned. "Shut up." But later, lying in bed, I couldn't help but wonder. Was I so caught up in my idea of fun that I ignored what Clara really wanted? Or was she just being polite about the whole low-key thing? I wanted to believe she appreciated the effort, but maybe Max was right. The moon was out of place. That was the first thing I noticed as I stepped out of the car onto the gravel driveway. It hung low, impossibly large and red, as though some celestial vandal had smeared it with blood. A fitting backdrop, I supposed, for what the evening would bring. The house stood ahead like a dark sentinel, its gabled roof piercing the night sky. This wasn't a place for family reunions. It was a place where secrets festered and ghosts whispered in the walls. But my family, being what it was, didn't see the irony of hosting talks in a house that looked like it ate conflict for dinner. They just called it tradition. I hesitated at the door, debating whether to knock or just burst in. A flickering light in the window caught my eye. Candlelight, I guessed, though the shadows it cast were strange, long and twisting, as if something unseen writhed within. I pushed the door open, and the creak that followed was a sound that had haunted my childhood nightmares. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the smell of something herbal, sage, maybe, or rosemary. Grandma swore by burning it during family discussions to cleanse the air. Judging by the looks on everyone's faces as I entered, the sage wasn't working. My mother sat in her usual spot at the head of the dining table, her fingers tapping a slow, measured rhythm against the wood. Grandma was across from her, stone-faced as always. The rest of the cast, various aunts, uncles, and cousins, filled the chairs, their expressions ranging from mildly annoyed to outright hostile. I dropped my bag by the door and stepped into the ring. "So," I said, forcing a breezy tone, "what's tonight's agenda? Witch trials? Public flogging?" No one laughed. Of course they didn't. Humor wasn't a currency my family dealt in. "Sit," Grandma commanded, her voice like gravel sliding down a hill. I didn't want to, but I did. There was no sense in starting the battle before the war officially began. "We've come to discuss your choices," my mother said, her tone as crisp and sharp as broken glass. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, my choices. Which ones specifically? The wedding? The color of my napkins?" or the fact that I dare to exist in a way that doesn't make everyone here comfortable. Don't get smart with us, Aunt Lydia snapped from her corner, her face pinched like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. I'm not getting smart, I said, leaning back in the chair. I'm just trying to clarify which part of my life everyone feels entitled to control tonight. Grandma cleared her throat, and the room went silent. She was the general in this family army, and everyone deferred to her, even my mother, who was usually the loudest voice in any room. Grandma's eyes, sharp and black as obsidian, fixed on me. You sent back invitations, she said. Not a question, an accusation. Yes, I replied. No point denying it. To people who made it clear they didn't want to be there. You've caused an uproar, she said, her voice low and steady. Do you know how many calls I've had to field? How many complaints? I shrugged. If people are so upset, they can stay home. Seems like I've solved everyone's problem. You've embarrassed this family, my mother hissed. Her hand gripped her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Do you know what people are saying? I laughed then, a short, bitter sound. People? Or your church friends who think Halloween is an open portal to hell? Because honestly, Mom, I don't care what they think. The room seemed to shrink at my words, the air pressing down on me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Grandma leaned forward, her chair creaking under her weight. You've always been difficult, she said, always pushing against the tide. I learned it from you. I shot back. Her lips twitched, just a fraction, but I caught it. And now, she continued, ignoring my jab, you're going to tear this family apart over what? Some spectacle of a wedding with costumes and in skulls. It's not a spectacle, I said, my voice rising. It's my wedding, my day, and I'm not tearing this family apart. You are. You, and everyone else who thinks it's their job to tell me how to live my life. Don't speak to your grandmother like that, Aunt Lydia cut in, her voice sharp as a whip. Oh, please, I said, turning to her. Spare me the righteous indignation. You didn't even RSVP until I sent the uninvites. You were waiting to see if there'd be drama, and now that there is, you're thrilled. Admit it. Aunt Lydia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. Victory, however small. Enough, Grandma said, her voice slicing through the tension like a knife. You've made your point, girl. You think you're strong, standing up to us like this. But strength isn't stubbornness. It's knowing when to bend so you don't break. I stood then, unable to stay seated any longer. And I think you're confusing strength with control. You don't like that I won't bend, because it means you can't break me. Well, get used to it. The room fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Grandma watched me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe you're right, she said, the words startling in their softness. Maybe it's time we stop trying to break you. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly, but she didn't say more. Instead, she stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and left the room without another word. The meeting ended shortly after. One by one, the others filed out, avoiding my gaze. My mother lingered, her expression unreadable. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end, she just shook her head and followed Grandma's path. I stepped outside into the rain, the cool drops washing away the tension of the night. The moon, still red and ominous, hung low on the horizon, but it didn't feel out of place anymore. It felt like a witness, a silent, unblinking witness to a battle I hadn't won, but hadn't lost either. And for now, that was enough. The first time I saw her, she was standing by the vending machine in the dimly lit basement of my office building. Her hair was an untamed mess of black curls, spilling out like she'd been running through the rain, though it hadn't rained in days. She wore an oversized coat that looked like it belonged to someone twice her size, and her boots were scuffed, mud clinging to the edges like she'd just waded through a swamp. She didn't belong here. But then, neither did I. It was almost midnight. I'd stayed late working on a proposal that was as exciting as boiled cabbage, but the promise of a vending machine Snickers was the highlight of my night. As I fumbled for coins, she turned to look at me. Her eyes were strange, too bright, almost feverish, and her lips curled into a smile that sent a shiver up my spine. "Late night?" she asked, her voice lilting, as if the question was a joke. I hesitated. "Yeah. You?" "Oh, I don't work here," she said, her smile widening. "I just wander." Wander. The word felt wrong, like it didn't belong in the fluorescent-lit monotony of this office. I chuckled awkwardly and pressed the button for my Snickers. The machine whirred and clunked, and when I reached down to grab the candy, I felt her eyes on me. "Do you like this place?" she asked. "The office?" I said, fumbling with the wrapper. "Not particularly." "No, this place," she said, gesturing vaguely around her. "The air, the silence. Doesn't it feel thin to you?" I had no idea what she meant, and I didn't ask. The kind of person who wanders office basements at midnight isn't the kind you want to engage with for too long. I mumbled something noncommittal and made my escape, her laughter following me up the stairs. The second time I saw her, I was back in the basement, this time searching for a file I'd stashed in storage months ago. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through an old office directory like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. She didn't look up when I entered, but she spoke as if she knew I was there. "Did you know," she said, "that most buildings have at least one floor no one uses? They just don't tell anyone." I paused, my hand resting on the doorframe. "What are you talking about?" She finally looked up, her eyes sparkling with a kind of mischief that felt entirely out of place. "Think about it. A janitor's closet with a door that doesn't open. An elevator button that skips a number. There are places in this building you haven't seen. I guarantee it." I snorted. "This isn't a haunted house. It's an office." She tilted her head, her grin softening into something almost conspiratorial. "That's what makes it perfect. Who would ever look?" I left her there, trying to shake the weird feeling she always gave me. But her words stuck with me. Over the next few days, I found myself glancing at floor plans, noticing things I hadn't before. An old stairwell that didn't seem to lead anywhere. A corner of the parking garage marked "Authorized personnel only," though no one ever went in or out. It wasn't until the third time I saw her that I started to believe her. I'd worked late again, the office eerily empty as I made my way to the break room. She was there, sitting on the counter with her legs swinging like a kid on a playground. This time, she was holding something. A key, long and rusted, with a handle shaped like an intricate knot. "I found it," she said, holding it up as if it was a prize. "Found what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "The door. Want to see?" I should have said no. Every rational part of me screamed at me to say no. But there was something in her voice, a challenge or a promise, that made me follow her as she led me down the hallway. She took me to the old janitor's closet at the end of the hall. I'd walked past it 100 times and never given it a second thought. But now, with her standing beside it, it felt different. The air around it was heavy, and the fluorescent lights flickered faintly, as if they too were uneasy. She slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing not the cramped supply closet I'd expected, but a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. I froze. "What the hell is this?" She didn't answer. She just stepped onto the first stair and motioned for me to follow. Against every shred of common sense, I did. The stairs seemed to go on forever, winding down and down until I lost track of how far we'd gone. The air grew colder, the darkness deeper. I could barely see her ahead of me, but I could hear her humming softly, a melody that made my skin crawl. Finally, we reached the bottom. The space was vast and open, the ceiling so high I couldn't see it. Strange machinery loomed in the shadows, gears and levers that looked like they hadn't moved in decades. The floor was covered in a thin layer of ash, and the walls were lined with doors, hundreds of them, each one slightly different. "What is this place?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She turned to me, her smile wider than I'd ever seen it. "It's everything they've forgotten, everything they've hidden." Before I could ask what she meant, the doors began to rattle, one by one. Something moved in the shadows, something I couldn't see but could feel, a presence pressing against my mind like a weight. I bolted, racing back up the stairs, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I was back in the office. The normalcy of fluorescent lights and cheap carpeting a stark contrast to the nightmare below. I never saw her again, but sometimes, late at night, I think about the basement, the doors, and the things behind them, and I wonder if she's still there, wandering. The argument started because of a pineapple pizza, not the kind you eat, the kind a cartoon penguin was holding in the middle of a surreal opening sequence. Absolutely not, Ethan declared, leaning forward on the couch like he was ready to physically stop the remote from playing it. I'm not spending my evenings watching a show where the intro looks like someone lost a bet with an acid trip. It's quirky, I countered, gesturing at the screen as if the vibrant kaleidoscope of dancing penguins, pizzas, and sentient vacuum cleaners could somehow plead its own case. You said you wanted something funny, and this is hilarious. People love it. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose in mock despair. What's it even about? The trailer told me nothing except that someone on the production team has unresolved issues with gravity. It's a mystery, I said, hoping the enthusiasm in my voice would outweigh the gaping holes in my knowledge. Truthfully, I didn't know much about the plot either, but I'd heard the buzz. It was clever, weird, and impossible to stop watching. Mystery, Ethan repeated, deadpan. You sure? Because it looks like the only mystery is what they're smoking. You said you wanted something fun, I reminded him, and I wanted something with substance. This is both. Ethan arched an eyebrow. Substance? The penguin is holding a pineapple, Emma. Fine, I snapped, grabbing the remote and backing out of the episode. Your turn. We were on week 3 of the Great Streaming War, a battle that had escalated from a minor disagreement into an existential crisis about what it meant to enjoy something together. Every suggestion I made, gritty, thought-provoking dramas with a twist, was vetoed for being too heavy. Every suggestion Ethan made, cheerful sitcoms and mindless rom-coms, felt like watching people solve their problems with conveniently timed hugs and soft lighting. I got it, Ethan announced, stopping on a show I'd vaguely heard of but never felt the urge to watch. Fireworks in Florence. The screen filled with a montage of beautiful people twirling in slow motion, laughing, crying, and, of course, kissing dramatically in the rain. Oh, come on, I groaned. It's just people being sad and attractive in Europe. It's called art, Ethan said, smirking. Something you'd appreciate if you could take a break from crime scenes and ominous piano music. It's not art. It's trauma porn, I shot back. Why does everyone have perfect cheekbones if they're so tortured? Where's the realism? Oh, because realism is so important to you, Ethan said. You literally wanted me to watch a show where a ghost dog solves crimes. Ghost dogs have layers. I retorted. They're a metaphor. Ethan snorted. A metaphor for what? Dropped storylines? I grabbed a throw pillow and lobbed it at him. He caught it mid-air, smirking triumphantly. Fine, I said, snatching the remote back. Let's try another trailer. This became the pattern for the night. I'd suggest something, and Ethan would find a reason to hate it. Then he'd suggest something, and I'd tear it apart. The remote control might as well have been a grenade we were tossing back and forth. Neither of us willing to pull the pin, but both itching to win the argument. Eventually, we landed on something called the Bake Off Murders. Ethan leaned back and crossed his arms. That's a stupid title. It's ironic, I said defensively. It's about a baking competition where someone gets killed, and they have to solve the murder while still competing. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Ethan said. Do they interrogate suspects over soufflés? Maybe, I snapped. But at least it's different. And you love baking shows, so it's like combining our interests. Combining our interests, he repeated, squinting at the screen like the trailer might give him a migraine. Emma, this is combining your love of murder with my love of bread. That's not compromise. That's culinary manslaughter. We sat in silence, the trailer looping on the screen while we both sulked. I was starting to think we'd never find anything we both liked. Maybe that was the point. Maybe we weren't supposed to. Maybe TV time wasn't about us finding common ground, but about carving out separate little islands where we could escape from each other's tastes. The thought made me a little sad. Finally, Ethan sighed. All right, I'll make you a deal. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of deal? One episode of your weird penguin thing, he said, holding up a finger. But if I hate it, we watched 2 episodes of fireworks in Florence. No complaints. I narrowed my eyes, suspicious. And if I hate fireworks in Florence? He grinned. Then we're even, and we watch Bake-Off murders. It was the most convoluted peace treaty I'd ever heard, but at that point, I was too tired to argue. Fine, I said, pressing play. The opening credits rolled, and Ethan groaned loudly as the cartoon penguin began dancing with the pineapple again. This is already a mistake, he muttered. Shut up and watch, I hissed. By the end of the episode, we were both laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. It wasn't just funny, it was bizarrely brilliant. The plot made no sense, the characters were chaotic disasters, and the mystery was barely holding together, but somehow it worked. Even Ethan admitted it. All right, he said as the credits rolled. That wasn't terrible. High praise, I said, grinning. Don't get used to it, he warned, but there was a spark of mischief in his eyes. Your turn to watch fireworks in Florence. I groaned, but a deal was a deal, and as much as I hated to admit it, the show wasn't as awful as I'd expected. Sure, it was melodramatic and drenched in cliches, but there was something hypnotic about all those slow-motion rain kisses. By the end of the 2nd episode, I was grudgingly invested in whether the tortured poet with the tragic backstory would ever find true love. We never made it to Bake-Off murders. Instead, we spent the next few weeks alternating between shows, our evenings swinging wildly between absurd comedy and heartfelt drama. And somehow it worked. The contrast made everything better, like pairing salty with sweet. Was it perfect? No. Ethan still groaned through every twisty plotline, and I still rolled my eyes every time someone on his shows had an epiphany set to a soaring indie ballad. But for the first time in weeks, we weren't arguing about what to watch. We were just enjoying it. AITA? The morning commute always felt like the longest part of the day, like time stretched itself thin just to mess with me. Radio static crackled in the background as I navigated the freeway, the rhythm of my blinker syncing up with the pulsing thrum of traffic. My exit was coming up fast, and like clockwork, the chaos around me intensified. A slow-moving sedan in the right lane, a semi blocking the middle, and me, stuck in the left, weighing my options. That's when it happened. The car in the right lane, silver and unassuming, sped up just as I angled toward the middle, effectively cutting me off. My fingers tightened around the wheel, a heat rising in my chest that I knew all too well. Commuter rage, the universal language of mornings. I shot the car a sidelong glare, my foot poised to tap the horn, but then I froze. It was her, Annie. She looked over at me with a grin so wide it could have powered the headlights, her hand waving with a casual joy that felt out of place amidst the grind of brake lights and exhaust fumes. In that moment, something primal clicked in my brain. The irritation drained out of me, replaced by confusion and, maybe, the tiniest bit of awe. My wife on the freeway, somehow managing to be both reckless and charming at the same time. But then reality crept back in. I was still boxed in, still barreling toward an exit I might miss, and still trying to process the collision of annoyance and affection brewing in my chest. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just refocused on the road, maneuvering into the middle lane at the last possible second. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Annie fall behind, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I might have imagined the whole thing. At work, her text arrived before I'd even logged into my computer. Sad you didn't wave back. Sad face. The emoji punctuated the message like a dagger dipped in sugar, soft and sharp all at once. I typed back a quick, dismissive reply. Could have missed my exit LOL. Love you. And with that, I let the morning dissolve into the day. But by the time I got home, I could feel it. The storm brewing in the silence. Annie barely looked at me when I walked through the door. Her greeting was clipped, her smile strained. You okay? I asked cautiously as we settled into dinner. Sure, she said, which I knew meant, not at all. After a few more bites of awkward quiet, she finally set down her fork with a sigh. Why didn't you wave this morning? Her question hung in the air like steam rising from a cup of tea, soft but scalding. I was driving, I said, as if that explained everything. So was I, she countered, her gaze fixed on me, but I still waved. I was excited to see you. I fumbled for words, the tension in her voice catching me off guard. I wasn't expecting it, that's all, and I was trying to make my exit. It's not like I didn't want to see you. Didn't seem that way, she said, her voice quieter now, but no less cutting. You looked annoyed, like I was just some random driver in your way. Her words hit harder than I expected, a gut punch delivered with pinpoint precision, because she wasn't entirely wrong. In that moment, I had seen her as just another car, another obstacle to navigate, and the realization stung. I didn't mean to make you feel like that, I said softly. I was just caught up in the moment, trying to focus on driving. Her eyes softened, but the hurt lingered. It's not about the wave, she said. It's about how you make me feel, like I'm someone you're happy to see, even when it's unexpected. Especially when it's unexpected. I sat with her words for a moment, the weight of them settling in my chest. Annie had always been good at finding joy in the mundane, at turning ordinary moments into something worth remembering, and I'd brushed it off, too wrapped up in my own world to see what she was offering me. The next morning, I left earlier than usual. I didn't tell her. I just drove, scanning every lane, every car, hoping for another cosmic collision. It took 3 loops around the freeway to find her, her silver car gliding effortlessly in the middle lane. This time, I was ready. I pulled up beside her and honked twice, my hand shooting out the window in an exaggerated wave. Annie's head whipped around, her face lighting up in surprise. She rolled down her window, and I did the same, the rush of wind and traffic roaring between us. "Morning, stranger," I shouted, grinning like a fool. Her laughter rang out, pure and uninhibited, cutting through the chaos like a melody. "Took you long enough," she called back. I stayed beside her for as long as I could, our impromptu caravan weaving through the lanes like 2 kids playing tag on bikes. When my exit finally came, I honked one last time, watching her wave frantically in the rearview mirror until she disappeared into the sea of cars. The rest of the day felt lighter, brighter, as if that brief encounter had injected my soul with something I hadn't realized I was missing. It wasn't just about the wave or the commute. It was about choosing to see her, to really see her, even in the most ordinary, chaotic moments. And I vowed to never let that chance slip by again.